Hello everyone. I don't know if you've met me before, but I'm Amelia and I'm a behavior expert. I help parents with tough behavior problems so they can be the parents that their kids need to be. So what we're talking about this week is a question that a mom asked me. It was a really, really good question. I thought I could talk about that for hours. I'll try to keep it short, but it was such a common question that I think it's definitely worth talking about in a video. So I'm just going to quote what she said because it was just perfect. She says, she's talking about her two kids when she gives them an instruction. She gives them a consequence if you don't do this, and then cooperation doesn't always happen. So she says, they know it's going to happen. It happens the same way every time. I usually give a consequence. So for example, if you don't clean up the Lego, it will not come out the next time you ask for it. She asked me, do I need to find a different consequence? Because that's how the world works. So those are her words, that's how the world works. And I completely get it. She's absolutely right. She's trying to teach her kids to adapt to a world where there's always going to be consequences if they don't follow the rules. If you think about the justice system, like you've driven a car, and so you've seen those speed limit signs. What happens if you go above the speed limit? You'll probably get a ticket. Or you've been in the school system. What happens if you don't go to class and turn in your homework? You'll probably get an F, or you won't pass the course. There are consequences, and this mom says, I want to raise my kids so they can grow up and deal with them. Why can't they just respond when I'm giving them a really clear consequence? That is a great question. And the answer is it's part neurology, part psychology, part behavior science, but there's also some alternatives to the consequence when they don't work. So let's talk about why it doesn't work, when it's least likely to work, because nobody wants to be that parent who just makes threats. I think a lot of parents get that. This mother said that she learned it with 1, 2, 3 magic. I think that's a really common approach. You know, you give an instruction, your child says, no, I'm not going to do that, or they avoid, and you say, okay. Now, in the moment, I have to think of an appropriate, natural consequence, and so that's stressful. You're not really solving the problem, you're just trying to, get control over the situation. No wonder when your child doesn't respond the way you want them to, no wonder it ends up exploding and yelling so often. This mom actually said, I haven't turned out to be the sort of mother that I wanted to be. I wanted to be one of those moms who just hangs out with their kids and has fun. I turned out to be a bit of a tyrant. There's lots of yelling and they yell back in turn. So of course I'm going to make a video because nobody wants to stay like that, but it's such a natural thing. When you learn this pattern where if somebody's not cooperating with you, you have to impose a consequence. Okay, so let's delve in a little bit to the human brain. I'm going to throw something at you. This is maybe a word you've never heard before. Let's talk about I think it's called the temporal parietal. There's a part of your brain on the right hand side, called the temporal parietal junction. And I was so jazzed when I read about it because neurologists have started to see different places in the brain that light up. So this particular place in the brain lights up when we're asked to think about other people's perspectives, when we're asked to shift our attention and look at things in a different way or look at a different activity. And it also affects self-control. So that makes sense. Those things are related. In order to have self-control, we should try to think of other people's perspectives. I also read some studies about what goes on in our brain when we look into the future and we think about our future selves. We all know that we make bad decisions sometimes that aren't in our best interest, but there's actually a neurological reason why that is. There are two different parts of the brain for thinking about our current self and our future self. So when you think about your future self, it's almost like you're thinking about another person. I'll deal with that later. So do you see how a consequence, if it happens in the future, it doesn't necessarily change your behavior in the present? We're very good at responding to things that are immediate. If there's something in our face, we react. If there's something in the future that we can't see, however, we're expecting kids to act like that thing is going to happen, but just because of the way we're wired, just because we're normal human beings, sometimes things that are off in the future, we kind of act like they're not going to happen. So I'm a behavior therapist, I'm not a neurologist, I'm not a psychologist, but we have observed and researched the fact that when something is in the future, when it might not happen, it's kind of uncertain, and the threat is kind of mild, people really behave as if it's not a consequence at all. So unfortunately, a lot of the time when we try to use consequence as a strategy for getting immediate behavior, It's not working. So you're off the hook. You don't have to be the kind of parent that threatens and punishes, because although people tell you that's how kids learn, that may not actually be the best way to get cooperation in that moment. You're off the hook. You're not doing a terrible job. Your kids are not terrible. That's just how we are. So what works better? So let's go back to these examples of the kids. They're playing Lego, and mom says, I need you to clean this up. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and I'm going to come back. I need it to be done so that we can go to school. Okay, totally reasonable. She leaves. She comes back. It's not done. What went wrong? Well, in order for the kids to cooperate, let's think about things from their perspective. Maybe they're like, oh, I've got 5 minutes. Like if it were me, I'll just play for 1 more minute. And maybe they lose track of time, and before you know it, it's 5 minutes. Mom is angry with me. She's frustrated. I'm frustrated. I'm yelling back. So let's go back to the consequences again. When the consequences are not immediate, or when we're not even remembering that they exist, they're not really going to affect our behavior. So for example, have you ever had a speeding ticket? And it's not because you deliberately decided to go over the speed limit. Maybe there just hadn't been a sign for a little while. Maybe you saw the sign before, but you hadn't seen it recently. Maybe you hadn't glanced down at the speedometer. When that consequence is not immediately on your mind, it's not really affecting your behavior. My son reminds me of this all the time. He's very frustrated with me when I try to follow through with the consequence. He says things like, I forgot. You should remember that I don't remember these things, or I didn't know. You didn't tell me. Unfortunately, if I try to, sometimes these are natural consequences and I have to follow through, but I can't really expect that to be a big learning experience if the idea of the consequence is not really present for him, if nothing's reminding him that that consequence is going to happen. So maybe these kids are losing track of time. Maybe they're having trouble with that right temporal parietal junction shifting their attention. They're like, yeah, mom, and their attention stays on the Lego. It's hard for kids to shift their attention from one thing to another. It's difficult. So whenever something is difficult and they're less likely to cooperate, what can mom do to actually help them shift their attention to the next thing? Well, if she's doing it in the moment and it's just something that has to get done, she can actually stay around. Sometimes having mom around, actually in the room watching you, it's like that speed limit sign. It's giving you that feedback, like, oh yeah, I have to do this. Mom can help. When mom starts putting that stuff away, it's easier for kids to imitate. That's like a prompt. Okay, so let's say she really actually doesn't have time to help them and stay in the room. She has to go and pack the kids' lunches, and she needs the kids to do it by themselves. There is something else that they can use. I'm just throwing this out there. There are actually a lot of different ways to do it, but just as an example, if she's got a piece of paper or a notebook or even a whiteboard, she and her kids can put together a visual. So she actually has a kid who can write, so this will be a great example. Just write little 3 boxes, for example. So play Lego for 5 minutes, tidy up Lego, and then what's the thing she wants to do after Lego, because there's another transition that we have to deal with, so we might as well just wrap them up all together, put on shoes. So let's write those little boxes. We've got this visual. We've even got a little timer so we're not running out of time. And we put the kids in charge. We put them in charge of managing themselves. Sweetie, can you write this for me? Okay. Can you put the 5 minutes into the timer? Great. Which one of you wants to be responsible for the timer? What are you going to do when the timer goes off? We're putting the kids in charge of themselves. And I think that's something that when we go with the very typical, you do it because I said so and you do it or else, when we take that approach, we miss this opportunity. What we're doing when we get the kids on board and we're asking them to be responsible for their own behavior is we're actually teaching them how to be responsible when there isn't something hanging over their heads, when there's no or else. We're asking them to learn how to problem solve, remind themselves, ask for help, and think things through. So I'd really prefer to take that approach, and I'm gonna send this video to the mom because I hope she can give it a try. I know she doesn't want to be the kind of mom who gets stuck and yells, but she's been given a pattern to follow that's not working for her and her kids. So we always got to get creative when that doesn't work and try something new. I really hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask in the comments. If you know other moms who are in the same do it or else sort of pattern, please tag them, share these in your groups. I would really appreciate it. Okay, thanks. Bye.